You're listening to Municast, the podcast that discusses municipal leadership. Season 3 of Municast is brought to you by SaskTel's Innovation and Collaboration team. SaskTel can help you sort through the noise to create solutions that add value quickly, whether it's reducing your environmental footprint, driving investment, community development, or just saving money. Contact your SaskTel account manager to find out more. Municast is hosted by SUMA, the voice of Saskatchewan's hometowns. I'm Stephanie, and joining me today is Randy Goulden, Councillor for the City of Yorkton and SUMA President. Randy has served on Yorkton City Council for 22 years and on the SUMA Board of Directors for 16 years. Randy has served on all council committees and commissions and has been very active in the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. As an active community volunteer, Randy has served on numerous community, provincial, and national committees and organizations, including terms as president of both the Canadian and Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association. Well, hello, Randy, and thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to chat with me today.
Well, it's a great summer and it's some great times going on, but we all continue to be busy, but I'm never too busy to stop and chat about what I love doing.
Oh, and thank you so much. We do really appreciate that. I wanted to start off our conversation today by going back to the beginning of your time on Yorkton City Council. You've been serving on council for 22 years and initially got involved through your children's activities. And I would love to hear some more of your insights on the growth of Yorkton, the way that things have changed, and why you feel that community involvement is so important.
I think back to when I first started getting involved in community engagement and community development and working as a volunteer. And I think that's how we all start. And perhaps that's how we get to really know our community and the people that live in them. I can remember, in our community, figure skating was big. Hockey was big in the wintertime. Our sons played hockey. The girls figure skated. Our one son was a figure skater too. And you all volunteered. You volunteered in the wintertime, but in the summertime, you did fundraising and you really got to know your community, the people, the organizations, the companies, the businesses. When it came time for an election, I was president of the figure skating club and someone said, well, Randy, you should actually run because we know that, minor hockey gets better ice time than figure skating. And at that time, I was chair of the recreation board of the day. So I thought, well, sure, this sounds pretty good. And I was very fortunate. The first time I ran, I got elected, which does not always happen. And very quickly, I found out that things aren't really what you think they are. And, I found out that, everyone gets their fair share in our communities. But it also led me, all that volunteering that I did, I got to know my community. I got to know the businesses, the struggles, the challenges, but also all the good things that they do. And I truly believe that's what's really led to the growth of our city of Yorkton over the time I've been on council, is we've got residents that care about our community, and we've got a corporate world here that really believe in investing in the community. We don't see the boom and the bust like many other communities do that maybe are in, some of those resource communities. We're a very agricultural based community. So it's pretty solid. It's pretty even in the, in the 80s when there were lots of challenges, we kind of remained the same. We didn't go up, we didn't go down, we remained the same. And we're seeing some of that now in Yorkton, although we have seen a great deal of growth. I know I just spoke with someone that came back to visit someone that I had gone to high school with, and we were visiting out at the lake, and he said, oh my gosh, Randy, I cannot believe the growth of Yorkton, how we've spread out. And sometimes I wish we didn't spread out quite as much, that we could build a little more density, because we know as you spread out, the need for infrastructure is there, and that increases the cost. But I've really seen our community grow. But what has been constant has been, the community engagement we have, the volunteerism, the business support. Whenever there's something that we need to do in the city, everyone seems to step up and make that happen. So in my mind, that's a really good way to grow and to develop, is to really have consistent buy-in from everyone that lives and works in our city.
I would agree. I think that that is so important to have that community engagement and involvement and that communication so that you can be there to support the community and what they're needing and when they're needing it. As a long-term member of council, what are some of the key ways that you would welcome and incorporate new council members?
I've seen many changes on our council. I've worked now with, this is my fifth mayor. And I've seen, different leadership styles, different ways that we work together. But I've enjoyed each and every one of them because I truly believe that public service is the best, absolute best thing you can do in your life. Whether that's being on council or being on committees of council, I think it really, really helps you grow as a person. I've seen council members come and they've served, and some have enjoyed their time, and some have said it's not what they think it is. So I always encourage anyone running for council to understand what their role is, what their responsibility is, so that they enjoy it, but they truly find it fulfilling. Because many times, things change when you get on council. You may come on for a special interest. And then you find out, oh, that's really not what we do here on our council. And you get impatient and frustrated. So when I work with people that are interested in becoming councillors, I always say to them, really sit down with, some of our council members, our mayor, our administration, our city manager, or whomever you might be interested in chatting with, and really get a good understanding of what we do and how we do it. Many new councillors find it hard to understand that we're legislated by provincial government, and there's many rules that we have to follow. And yes, sometimes it takes a little longer, but we have to be cautious. Risk management is also a very big part of that. So I love to be able to sit down and chat with people as they're interested in running for council and help them through some of those processes to make being on council as smooth and enjoyable as possible.
I think that was a really good point that you made there about how different people are interested in joining council or running for mayor for different reasons. And everyone comes in with their own style or their own approach and those things that they're wanting to work towards. And while that is a challenge, it can also be a really big learning opportunity. You were recently also elected the SUMA President, and you have been on the SUMA Board of Directors for several years, and you have seen the organization undergo a lot of changes as well. Can you share some of your thoughts on how SUMA has developed and changed during your time on the board?
Well, I've been on SUMA for 16 years, and for many of those years, I was the director for East Central Saskatchewan, which is very dear to my heart because I represented 2 cities and towns and villages and resort villages. So communities of all different sizes. And that's important, as a director or president of SUMA is to understand who we represent. I was interim president twice and then was very, very fortunate to be elected as president in April of 2022. I'm really excited about it. I still have a hard time when someone says President Goulden that they're actually talking about me now. But I often say this to anyone that says, well, you're president now. But a president we chair the meetings and we sign letters, but it's all about our board of directors. It's all about our board of directors and bringing everyone together in a cohesive understanding of what we have to do. And then we're only as strong as our administration because we're out in our own worlds. We have council responsibilities in our own communities. We meet as a board of directors and we provide strategic direction. And then we have our administration that carry all that out. I'm very proud of those kind of things, but I understand my role in what I have to do. Thinking about changes, I see what has happened in the last 2 years. And we know as our board of directors and our council, we've seen many different changes that occurred because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I have to say, some weren't as appreciative. So we didn't appreciate as much, and some we've gained things from. Like we've been able to communicate much better with our members, hosting meetings with people that we don't have the great distances. We can just do a Zoom. We can do a Zoom meeting. And sometimes, it's always nice to have that direct face-to-face or sit down and have a coffee with them. But I've seen in the past, that has been a change that I think has been beneficial for us, because we can just get to people more often and more quickly, and it's more productive. Have there been changes? As I said before, absolutely. And we have to continue working with whatever comes our way.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're talking about things like virtual, that was something that a lot of us were not expecting, and we all just kind of had to deal with it as it came. And there have been some cons to it, but it's been nice to be able to connect with people a little bit more easily in some situations.
And oh my gosh, my grandchildren think I'm a rock star on the internet and electronically and virtually. I help them with some things. Most of them are university students, and of course have been online and virtual with their classes. And I'm like a rock star. So I have SUMA and my council to thank for that.
Oh, that's great to hear, because I know the kids were catching up to us very quickly with technology. So it's good to hear that SUMA was able to support you so that you could be that rock star to support your grandkids as well. You talked a little bit about the importance of the various sizes of communities that you represent as the regional director. Can you tell me a little bit more about what motivated you to run for SUMA president?
I think it's a gradual thing of being involved in the board. I found it the same when I was very involved in the recreation world as a volunteer and working with recreation directors and administrators. I soon found myself running for president of the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association. And after a couple of years, I was then president of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. So kind of being a president, a leader of an association, I've got some experience and I've got some understanding of what it takes. An understanding that, first of all, you have to have the dedication. In my mind, in my opinion, you have to have the commitment and the time and the organizational skills to do those kind of things. So when I sat down and when the opportunity came to me in early 2022, I talked with my family. I had a really good discussion because I wanted to make sure that I had their support. And I also talked with members of my council, because it may take time away from my council meetings or some of the work that I might have to do. So I made sure that I had the support. And I find this as a natural progression. I've been on the board of SUMA. I've been a long-term council member, and I see this as the next step of how I can contribute to my community and to my province.
Thank you for sharing that, Randy. I know we are very happy to have you as the SUMA president. It's been a wonderful few months so far.
Thank you.
Across the province, SaskTel is engaged with many different municipal organizations who seek to innovate. Contact your SaskTel account manager to learn more about some of these initiatives and how they can help your municipality today. So not only are you very busy with your role as councillor and as the SUMA president, you also work with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. What made you decide to also take on a role with FCM, and what are some of the roles that you've played?
Well, some of the things that I talked about is having, support from family and friends. And many years ago when I first ran for FCM, I had an incredible mentor who of the time was president of SUMA, President Mike Badham. He was a councillor, long-term councillor for the City of Regina. And I did some international work with him through FCM. And then he suggested when an FCM board position came open that I run for that. So I did, and I ran for member at large. Saskatchewan has 5 positions on the FCM board. 2 are appointees, which are the president of SUMA and the president of SARM. One is a representative of one of the 3 largest cities, so Saskatoon, Regina, or Prince Albert. And then 2 positions are opened for at-large. Mike felt it was really important that we have someone there from a smaller community, not just the Reginas and the Saskatoons. He wanted someone from the smaller. So again, I put my name forward on a ballot, not knowing what would happen. And fortunately, I was elected, and find that role very fulfilling. But I also find it very much consistent with the work we do. So whether it's my council or the work SUMA does or the work FCM does, it all is interconnected. And I guess one of the examples I would have is the work that we're doing now on the costing of policing, especially around RCMP. So there's a role for our councils, there's a role for SUMA, and there's definitely a role for FCM to advocate to our federal government for more input and more understanding of policing in Canada.
You're quite involved in all different levels of it. And I think that was a good highlight that you made there, is that they are connected at these different levels too, is that some things are municipal issues, but they're also federal issues. And so it's nice to be able to have a foot in each of those doors to be parts of those conversations. There was an article that came out about you fairly recently where you were quoted saying, "I really believe that being elected to a municipal council, you elect for the skills and the knowledge that the people bring. But I do see the difference between women and men serving, and it's not better, it's not worse, it's different." I really appreciated your insight on how change is absolutely different, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad. And I know that you have done a lot of work with engaging women in politics. So I wanted to see if you could tell me a little bit more about some of the events and the groups that you have been a part of, and what has motivated you to offer these opportunities for other females to become political leaders.
It's so interesting over my years on city council and taking part in decision making. And I really see women have different ways of coming to decisions that I find is more nurturing. We reach out more, we are more understanding. And when we make decisions, it's all encompassing. So I believe that is a real necessary role that we should have on councils and boards and committees, and also in administrations. So the work that I do in my community and nationally, like through FCM, I'm very involved in increasing women's participation in municipal government. And when I say that, I take that to my community because it's not just in elected positions. I also believe strongly that women should have roles to play in the administration of our communities and our councils. So whether it's in the city manager's role or the town administrator's role, the city clerk's role, the finance, any of those kind of committees, economic development, I could go on and on, recreation. Also in our committees of council, because the work that I do in my community, I gather women for just informal lunches. And they may be women that are involved in education. Then I may meet with women that have businesses. I might meet with women in the health field, and we'll just have an informal lunch. There's no agenda. It's just having a good hour and a half lunch break and talking about what is important to us. Through that, I encourage women to sit on our committees of council. Because I truly believe that's how they can play a role in our municipal councils if they choose not to run for municipal council, but being on our planning and infrastructure committees, being on our environment committees, our economic development committees, they can also help us set policy and determine where we want to go as a city. So I think there are different roles that women can play depending where they are in their life. If you have a young family or if you have a challenging job, you may not feel that being on a council is something that you can do right now, maybe in a few years' time, but you still want to contribute. There are ways to do it. So I encourage women to look at the different ways to get involved with our city.
I really like that method. I find it's very relationship focused, especially those informal lunches and just the opportunity to get to know each other and where you're at and kind of what areas might be good for people to step into. And I really liked how you brought up that you speak to people from different areas. Someone in education and someone in health will have very different lines of sight on what they are wanting to see happen in politics and on council. So it's very nice to see that those wide conversations are happening.
Well, and it's really interesting too, because municipalities through our legislation, we really don't have a direct role in education or in health and, some of those things. But yet we know that it impacts everything we do in our city. So it's always good to have, as you said, that relationship or those communication paths that if there's a decision that has to be made, you have people that you can reach out to. And I think women can play a really good role in that too.
So sort of along that same line, we mentioned before that you're a leader in Yorkton with SUMA and with FCM. You represent your municipality and associations locally, nationally, and internationally. What are some of the tools that you use to help keep yourself from burning out and be able to stay engaged at all of those levels?
Well, first of all, I think you have to take time for yourself. And you need to schedule that in. So in order to do that, working with me or getting to know me, I'm a very organized person. And I'll tell you what's really helped me is my wonderful iPhone with the schedule that I keep on that. Every week before the week starts, I look at my week and then I set the days out. I take a look at those days and say, okay, what's nice? What's have to have? Where are my deadlines? And I set the goals for myself. And I'm very honest with myself. Do I have time to do all this? I've learned to say, no, I'm sorry. I just at this time can't do that. And I think that's difficult. I think that's difficult for a leader. I think that's difficult for a woman, but I've learned to say that. I also have connections. So it's connections with my family, connections with my friends, connections with people I work with and that I sit on boards with, because I think those connections are very, very helpful because they can soon say to you, Randy, I don't know if you did a really good job on that. Perhaps you should take another look at that, or maybe you're a little overextended. Somebody that you can be very honest with, that you can ask those impressions and have those relationships. And sometimes, you can't have quite that detail with your family. They don't want to hurt you. But I'm very fortunate. I have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. And my children are very open and honest with me. If they think I'm overdoing things, they let me know very quickly. And sometimes I listen to them and sometimes I say, hey, I can remember when you were growing up giving you direction and you didn't exactly take it, you modified it somewhat. So I think those connections and having good support system are really, really important. And then taking time for yourself. I've learned that physical activity is an absolute in everyone's life because if you're physically active and you're going outside, I grew up on a farm. I grew up going outside. I grew up, skating. I grew up shoveling the rink. I grew up doing all those things. And perhaps some of the things that we shouldn't have been doing because we lived on a farm and it was much easier to just do things without a lot of supervision. I look back on it now and I'm going, oh my gosh, how did we get away with that? But it gave me a joy of life, right? It gave me a little bit of wanting to explore things. So I do a lot of walking. I used to run. I've now moderated that to doing a lot of walking. I spend time at the cabin at the lake. I drive into work. It's only 25 minutes. And I go out for walks all the time. I take time to enjoy what I do. I make sure that I have that time for myself, that I schedule it in. Like I know some days you just don't have the time, but then the next day you take the time and you do that. And that's the advice that I would give to everyone so that you're enjoying what you're doing, because it's no sense doing all of this if you're not happy and you're not having a good time and you're not smiling. And I work with the public a lot. And some days it's not that easy. But I just think, well, they're having one of those days, so let me try and make their day a little bit better, even if they think, what is that person doing? So I would suggest to everyone to take time for yourself. Take those holidays, take those days off and spend time with your family and friends and get outside and do some physical activity, no matter what that is.
Thanks, Randy. I think that is some really great advice and so important. It seems like such a simple thing to do, but to say no or to take time for ourselves or schedule that in is so much harder than it is to say. So I really appreciate you highlighting that for everyone as well. And something else that I heard in there too was the connection with other people in similar positions to you on council or in municipal politics. In our last podcast episode where we talked with Don Iveson, he said a very similar thing, that having people around in a similar role that were able to talk about those things was so valuable, because you are dealing with things in your positions that you don't necessarily have friends or family that are dealing with in the same way. So it's nice to have other people who are going through similar situations and circumstances. And in Saskatchewan, we know that there are barriers to mental health services in smaller municipalities. What mental health and addiction services are available in the Yorkton area? And do you find that Yorkton has the capacity to support the surrounding municipalities as well?
Well, in Yorkton, we are very, very fortunate. We have a leader in the province with one of our community-based organizations, and it's an organization that is very dear to my heart. I am a past president, past chair of it, and it's what we call SIGN, the Society for the Involvement of Good Neighbors. And we have contracts with 6 ministries here in the province, and just do incredible work. Everything from mobility vehicles with people with mobility issues to walk-in counseling, to people that have had the victims and have had sexual abuse and abuse in their lives. So a very, very good organization with professional help for everyone. And so we're fortunate to have that, to have professionals that can help people and can help people as quickly as possible, help families, help new people into our city, learn how to enjoy and get through some of the barriers of moving into a new country. So I'm fortunate that we have that in our city, and we see many, many people take advantage of that. Not only in our city, because some things like the acquired brain injury, we do the whole region. We offer walk-in counseling to the Campsack area. So we work with many different regional organizations to provide these services. So in my mind, I would like to see a sign in all the areas of our province. But with that, you need to have the professionals that come with it and the funding that comes with it too. So I know that our SIGN CEO, Andrew Sedley, works with a provincial organization of like community organizations. So hopefully that this is a model that can continue expanding across our province and work with our communities and our provincial government, because we know that there is much need out there, and it's been really exacerbated through the pandemic we've had in the last 2 years. And whether it's young people, children, working people, people that are more mature, we know that there's those needs, that there's needs with people suffering from issues and addictions that sometimes they don't want to identify by themselves, but when they do, we need to make sure that help and assistance is there.
It's good to hear that SIGN is in Yorkton and is able to cover some of the region and really assist in that way. It sounds like they're quite a good organization. Kind of piggybacking off of that, you mentioned that you hoped other regions would have similar programs to that. Do you see gaps in the mental health and addiction services throughout Saskatchewan? And what do you think can be done to address some of those gaps?
I think what we need to see is consistent service throughout the whole province. So it doesn't matter if you live in Beauval, if you live in Swift Current, if you live in, if you live in Calder, you should be having those services in a timely fashion. Because what I hear is that it's very difficult to get in to see people. And then the other thing I'm hearing is the issue around transportation and getting to these appointments wherever they may be, if you can get one. So I think, I know that SUMA is working very hard advocating for consistency around our province for timely services so that people can enjoy living throughout the province in whatever community they want to, large or small. Because if you don't have those services, it becomes very difficult to stay in those communities. So the work that I will continue to do is advocating that we are able to get those services and working with our provincial government and the ministries in it to see what we as SUMA or we as our communities can do to assist, because sometimes it's not always money. It's other things that we can provide and work together. And I think that's really important.
I agree. And I think highlighting the transportation issue there is a big one. When so many of the services are located in city centers, it's very difficult for people from the smaller municipalities to travel in, especially when travel is limited in the province right now. We don't have easy access systems to do that are public. Are there efforts that you have seen other municipalities or provinces do that you would like to see a little bit more of in Saskatchewan to help address some of the issues that we were just speaking about?
Well, right now, what I'm seeing in some other communities in British Columbia and Ontario are regional transportation, bus systems that will take people from smaller communities into appointments. And we have a little bit of that. Some of the private businesses have done some of that, but that's difficult. It really is. So right now, you can go in to an appointment in Regina. We have a good, a nice little service here in Yorkton. The issue that we have is people have to get into Yorkton. So if you live in Buchanan or Norquay, the shuttle's leaving Yorkton at 8 o'clock, you have to get in here. And then you have to get picked up and taken back home. And that's the issue that has to happen. So you have to rely on family or friends. Sometimes that's not there. So that is a real issue. So I would really like to see us do more of that. We know that things like Greyhound has discontinued their service. And I know that FCM is advocating for a system that can help connect communities across the provinces. So I think we need to work on that. And maybe there is a continued role for private business, but where they may need subsidization, we may have to look at that. I know that some of the shuttle services, they can't provide the service for people that have mobility issues, that may be in wheelchairs. And we know as the demographics of our province will show you, we have an aging population right now, and we have mobility issues. So, how do we support that? And I'm seeing some of that in other provinces, and I'd like to see that here. I'm also seeing more work in some other provinces in broadband and expanding our broadband. And you'll say, well, how does that connect to services? Well, people need to have that connectability to make appointments or to do business or talk to, for instance, my husband was ill a couple summers ago, tried to call in to the doctor. He was, it was a great service. We actually talked with the doctor that was in Maple Creek and provided service. Well, if you didn't have broadband, you couldn't do that. So I think we have to look at how our connectability too, because it's not a necessity anymore to watch Netflix or something. It's becoming a real part of creating good quality of life. So those are a couple things that I've seen communities in other provinces working on, and I'd like to see us do that too.
You really highlighted how it's not just municipal governments that need to deal with that. It goes beyond to the provincial government and working with them and working with the federal government as well. And not only that, but how interconnected some of these issues are, like broadband and transportation. So these are very large, complex issues that we are trying to address, and it may seem slow, but they're coming, and we're starting to see them in other areas. That brings me to the end of my questions for you today, Randy. I wanted to thank you so much for joining us to discuss your career in municipal politics, initiatives that you're passionate about, and different barriers that municipalities face when addressing mental health and addictions, and just access in general. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to share some time with you, and really enjoy the rest of the week.
This brings us to the end of another episode of Municast. Thank you for tuning in to Season 3. We hope you enjoy it as much as we have enjoyed having these conversations. Join us for Episode 3, where we will be speaking with Jordan McPhail, councillor for the northern town of La Ronge.